Hi, I'm Bob Lefferts, and welcome back to How to Make Your Own Video Game. This is episode 7. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to actually show you how to refactor and how to reorganize your code so it's a little bit more general purpose and useful. After we do that, we're going to actually create a new library. We'll make our own library with some of our useful function in it that we can use later. And then for the next project, there's going to be some shapes and graphical images and some sounds that we need to download. You need to download to be ready to start building the video game. And so I'll show you where there's a package you can download and install, and I'll show you how to do that in this episode. So let's get started. Here is the code that we left off with the last time. I'll walk through it briefly, but you can see some of the beautiful pictures we drew down here at the bottom by setting these attributes about how we want the shapes to be drawn. We start by importing random math and tkinter. This is actually redundant, it looks like. It's showing up as not being useful, so we can delete that, clean it up a bit, because we're importing everything from TK. And then we're also importing TTK, as we showed last time. So we import the stuff we need. We create a window. We create a frame in the window, put it at the top. We create a canvas that's black, fill it in both X and Y so it takes up the bulk of the window. Make a set of colors we're going to randomly walk through. Make an undo list where we can keep track of what we drew so we can undo it. And then we have our move D in direction A. And so this is the function that we started off with that defines the distance and an angle and gives you a second point, gives you a starting point, and then returns the new point that goes that distance at that angle. And then we're using that function in our draw. Our draw function takes an event. So we call this draw function when you click. And it gets the position where you click, it unpacks the angle, the distance, all these other variables from our widgets in our window. And then it actually does the drawing with these for loop. There's an outer loop. Then there's actually a loop where it's incrementing the distance that we're moving. Or you can see it does an increment here. And then there's an inside loop here that is the outer loop. And then there's an inner loop here that actually draws the shapes and then repeat and turn around. And that's our drawing function. We have a simple function to clear the screen. And we have an undo function that grabs the list of things that were drawn. And if there's something on that list, then it goes through and deletes all the objects that are in that list. And then we created an entry widget that's really helpful for just making an entry point. It does the label and packing and sets the default value all in one little function. So we call that at the bottom. And then here's our main program where we just find a button on the top frame, the undo button, place to enter the angle, the distance, the inside loop count, the outside loop count, how much we're going to increment by, and then the increment loop, how many times we're going to loop, and then the width. And then we put in our ability to change when we're going to change the color, and then we bound button 1 to the draw function. We're going to start by refactoring this program a little bit because our draw function is currently doing more than one thing. And what you find when you're programming is it helpful to separate out each thing you're doing into separate functions so that you can do them independently. And I'll show you how that works in this case. So right now, draw is doing two things. If we go back and look at draw, it is not only getting the event and the XY where we clicked, but it's also unpacking all the data that's stored in these widgets where we decide how distance we want to go and how many loops we want to go. And then we click and it uses this information. So what we want to do is we want to separate these two functions. The first function draw is doing is figuring out what we want to do. And then the second function is actually doing the looping and doing the drawing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to refactor that by creating a new function called define a function called click. And this is going to take the event. Okay, so when we click, this is the function that's going to change. And we're going to go down here to the very bottom. And instead of binding button 1 to draw, we're going to bind button 1 to click. So now when we click the button, click the mouse, it's going to draw, it's going to call click instead of draw. And then this is going to change to click. So if we ever turn this on and want to do a motion. So now what happens when we hit click? Well, the first thing that happens is we want to use click, and I'm hitting Control Shift up arrow. We want to move click up into this function. Whoops. Tab it over. So we want the click to unpack the event and get us XY, but we also want to use the click function to get all the variables that we need in our drawing program. So I'm going to go in here and hit Control W and select the line and then Control Shift down, sorry, I'm going to hit the shift down button and grab all of the parameters that we were setting with these widget variables. And I want to move those with Control Shift up arrow, move those up into our Click program. So now Click is going to actually get all the information from this toolbar, and we're going to use Click to do that, and then it's going to call the draw function. So at the bottom here, we're going to say now draw, and we need to add these variables into the draw function. So for example, we're going to say draw, give it X, Y, give it the angle. Let me put a little space in here. Draw angle, give it the distance, give it the inner count, give it the outer count, give it the distance for the increment, give it the increment count, and then finally give it the width. And we'll need one more in a minute, but that's okay. So that gets us started. So these are the arguments that we want to pass into our draw function. So now draw takes the X, Y, the angle, the increment count, everything, right? And there should be an increment count. There is here. I don't know why that's complaining that it's not defined. We count of random walking, we count any. Okay, fine. Well, I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. So one thing that's missing is inside here is the color where get. So this is actually talking to the widget. We want to decouple the talking to the widget from the actual drawing. And so we need to replace this with a variable that we're going to add here on the end. And we're going to call this color what? Why not? And now what I want to do is I want to replace color where get. And you go to edit and you can go to find replace. And I want to replace color where get with see what is I think what I call it, right? Is that what I called it? Yeah, see what. So now if I hit replace and then replace the next one, fine. Yeah, it replaced it here. Color what. So I replaced the three color whats and I put the color what in as a variable at the end here. Now I need to pass this in, so I have to add see what to the end of the list, and I have to define what it is. So I need to do that by saying see what as far as color what, and that is going to be the, I deleted it all, so I go down to the bottom here and get it. It is color where, copy, put it in here, color where dot get the value in color where. So that's going to be the string that we're going to pass in here, and then we're going to pass it into the draw function. So if I did that correctly, we've broken up the two functions. We've broken up the two things that draw was doing, getting what we wanted to do and drawing into two functions. The click function gets all the information we need, the event, the angle, the distance, the loop counts, and this is increment count. That's why this is upset. You see this is not being used? That's because this is not what I wanted. I wanted this to be inner loop, inner count, and I made it the increment count. Typo in word see what. Okay, it doesn't like the fact that I called it see what. Let's do this. Well, it's okay. I could do this. I could see if I can make Python happy by doing this. I'm going to refactor this and rename see what to color what. Color what. And so that changed that, and then I can do the same refactoring here. Refactor, rename, because it's in different scope, so it's a different variable. Rename this to color what. And I refactor that, and it should change it there and here and here and here and here. So now it's all refactored. It's still a little bit upset, and it's trying to figure out what color what is because it's not typed. But we'll see if it cheaply is. So I'm going to close this window. And the other thing that I'm going to do is down here at the bottom, we defaulted the color what we wanted to color to click, and I actually much prefer shapes. So I want to color each shape. Let's give that a try. So let's cancel this guy. That gets rid of that guy. And I want to right click here and say run random walk and duplicate argument in function definition. So increment count is in here twice in my definition. And that's because I copied this guy up here and I didn't finish this guy. Inner count. So inner count, outer count. So these are all matching this, and I just moved all the variables to the top and left these two functions. So this drawing one does the drawing, and this first one decides what we want to draw and then calls draw. And that's very important. We'll see why we did that in a second when we refactor that. So let's go ahead and hit run and see what happens. Look at that. I got myself a canvas. This is coloring by shapes. If I click, I get my, oh, it's not shapes, it's shape. How about that? Let's go fix that. I changed the default down here, which is shape. Shapes is not in the list, so it didn't work. I want shape to be what I want to color. So let's try this one more time. And here we go. So when I click down here, I get my beautiful looking thing, and I can change the width to let's say 16, and it looks pretty decent, right? I'm coloring every shape. I can color by each size. Actually, I prefer that. So let's make this size. Color each size, my preference, but you can always change it. Okay, now, so we're back in functional, but we've made a slight difference in that we've got a draw function where I can actually tell it exactly what I want to draw. So what if I went down here and I defined my own function, define my preference, and it doesn't have any argument, doesn't need any argument, it's just a function, and it's going to draw. Let's say I draw, I'm going to call draw directly, and the first argument has to be in parentheses. It's a tuple. Where do I want to draw? Let's say I want to go 100 in X and 225 in Y at 0 degrees, right? It's telling me where I'm at. Now the distance. I want to go, let's say I want to go 8, and then I want to go 8 times with an outer count of 8, with a distance increment of, let's say, 8, and a width of line 8, and I want to color it by size. Okay? But then I can hit Control D, and I can move over a little bit. Let's go, instead of 100 over, let's go 400 over, so we went 300 pixels to the right. And instead of drawing this, let's draw a 20 degree angle with 3 inner loops, 6 outer loops, and then 8, 8, and 4. And we'll again color by size. And then I can even do that one more time. Control D gives me a duplicate. Oh, instead of 400 over, we're going to go 700 over. We're adding 300 each time. We'll go 700 over, and we're going to do same Y coordinate. And we'll do 20. And sorry, that's the angle. We'll do 0 and 8. And make this 8. Sorry. And this last one will be 16. So it's a little bit fatter. It's like this guy, but fatter. So now there's a function that's actually going to draw, and you can make up these numbers based on what you like, right? Make your own preference. And it'll actually draw them not where you click, but when you call this function. So now we just need to be able to call this function. So let's go ahead and go down here, and we're going to duplicate this undo button by hitting Control D. And we're going to change the name of this thing from undo to my pref. Let's see, my pref. And then we have to remember to pack my pref. Remember, we had this problem before. My pref. And then I want to move this Control Shift down arrow, move this to the bottom so it's the last button. And now when we restart, we have added the ability to not only click and get a nice drawing, but we also have the ability to, where'd my button go? Oh, it's called undo. That was a problem. It's a different button. We didn't really want to call it undo. We wanted to call this draw, just call it my preset. It's a set of preset shapes that we defined in the function, not undo, but in the function that we called myPref. So this is myPref. Okay? And we don't put the parentheses here because we want the actual name of the function, not the result of the function. So now when we run this program, there should be a button on the end called myPref, my preset, which there is. That's what we called it. And if I click on the screen, let's make this 10 instead, a little smaller. There's the drawing that this is coming from these arguments. But if I hit my preset, oh, color what is missing? In my draw function, if we click on this, it's missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm missing one. So what this is let's see what it's missing. PyCharms is telling me that I should have spaces after all my commas. It would prefer that. And let's see if I can get it to fix that for me. Code, reformat code. I don't know. Yeah, so it reformatted, put the spaces in there for me. That'll make it happier. After the XY, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm missing the width parameter here, so this needs to be 8. And this needs to be 8. Because I want the line width to change, and this needs to be 8. I think that will help. Let's give it a shot. So again, angle, distance, inner loop, outer loop, distance that we want to increment by, the number of increments, and the last one becomes the width of the line. So let's try that. So again, I click. I get the default that is set up with the default values that we have here. But if I click my preset, it draws. And one thing we might want to add is in the beginning of my preference, we might want to say clear screen so that it gets a clear screen to paint on. That's an option that you have. So let's clear the screen. Let's restart the program. And now when I hit this button, my preset, it will clear the screen. So every time I push it, I get different random colors. And this guy's probably not quite far enough over. So let's add 150 to each one of these. So that'll be 250. That'll be 550. And that'll be 850. And then we'll restart the program. And now we have a drawing function that we can use to actually draw. And so when I hit my preset, there you go. And every time I hit it, it clears the screen and draws another set, and I can get the colors that I like. I can still click. Let's change this to 10. I can still go over here and click and add stuff to it. So we wanted to refactor and show you how to refactor and break functionality into separate functions. Then I can show you that once you've done that, now I have a draw function I can call directly. And no matter what I draw on the screen, right, I can push my preset and it redraws the first 3, and you can keep adding things to that. You can make the screen bigger. And so that's what we wanted to do. Now, the next thing we need to do, or too much time has gone by, is we call this random walk. That's not really what we want, okay? So we're going to right-click on random walk. So first of all, if your project is collapsed, right, you don't see it, just click on the folder over here, and you'll see here's random walk. And what we do is we can right-click on random walk. So I'm right-clicking, and I go to refactor, rename, and I want to change random walk. This is not a random walk. This is drawing, I'm going to call this my paint, right? Because it's more of a painting program than anything else. So I hit refactor, and now I rename this to my paint. Functionality is exactly the same. I just right click on it and say run, and it'll work. So we refactored that, and we want to create, we've got some functions in here, like my entry is pretty useful. And we also have, again, Control Shift minus collapses everything down. We also have this move D in direction. That's a very useful function that we might want to use sometime else. So let's do the following. We're going to create a new Python file. So that was a right click on up here, right click, new Python file. And we're going to call this mylib. And we're going to create our own library of things that we want to use later that are useful. Now, normally PyCharms defaults to having these on tabs, but you can grab this and move it to the right, and it'll be on the right and this function on the left. We're done with the thing at the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bigger and show you how we're going to refactor our code to move functions into the library. So the first thing that we want to do is from mylib import everything. Okay. Now, there's nothing over here yet. One of the things that you're going to need is anything that's used by the functions we move over there, we need to move. So, for example, we're going to need random, math, and tkinter. So we'll copy these and put them over here in mylib. Okay. And then we want to move this function. So if I open this up and I grab this whole thing, I can say cut and paste over here. So it's no longer in my main program, that's my paint program, but it's in a library. So I can, anytime I want to go a certain distance from a point, I can use this function. And then the other one that was useful was this my entry function. So we're going to take this out, cut it out with a Control X, and paste it in at the bottom over here so that now I have my library and the code is simpler to read. That should actually work. Let's go ahead and give it a try by hitting the run button. Let me stop the program first. And now let's restart and see how that works. So it's thinking, it came up. If I make this 10 and click, it worked. And if I hit preset, it worked. Okay? So we took our functions and we broke them up so that we can then use my library, and we'll start putting other functions in my library. We start getting to building the game. Any of these things that we want to use, we can take that code and reuse it. Very, very helpful to create a library and put all your generic functions in there. So that's what I wanted to get done today. I do want to show you how to download, briefly, how to download the contents for starting our next program. So let's do that now. So while you're watching on YouTube, if you go away from full screen and scroll down, you'll see comments. And if you scroll to the top comment, you'll see it says to download shapes and sounds, click here. And when you click there, it brings you to a location where there's a folder called Image and Sounds. And you push download and then bring up your downloads directory. And the first file in your downloads directory should be Image and Sounds. And when you right click on it and go to extract all, then you get the extract dialog where you can decide where you want to put this folder. So where we're going to put it is in the C drive under users, under me, you'll find your PyCharm projects here. We want to go to Missile Command, and that is where you can see this users Bobble PyCharm projects Missile Command, and we want to put it in here by hit select folder and extract. So we're going to put it in the same location as where our project is up here in PyCharms. So now I hit extract, and I can close this, and in our PyCharms project, you can see that we now have images, sounds. And if you open it up, there are some images and some WAV files that we'll be using in the next episode.